Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. We are your Cubs beat writers at the Athletic.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
I missed something that I don't normally say, and now my head is thrown off. Anyways, we are this is a Cubs podcast for Foul Territory Network. Patrick, we're going to talk a little bit about Kyle Tucker here. I feel like for a year now, it's been about a year since they acquired Kyle Tucker. Yeah. We have been talking about this, alluding to this, the inevitable departure of Kyle Tucker, that this was a 1 year stint with the Cubs. This is not something that we are surprised by, that the Cubs are not, when you see these public lists of who the Cubs are or who is interested in Kyle Tucker, you're not seeing the Cubs on there. So I don't think it's a huge surprise to see all these other teams. And now we're seeing noise that the Toronto Blue Jays, who have been incredibly active, already signed Dylan Cease. Cody Ponce, a solid bounce back candidate who was in Korea for the last couple of years. And now they're showing real interest in Kyle Tucker, who was out touring their spring training facility, apparently.
Yeah, that's a nice local trip for Kyle, who grew up in Tampa, not all that far from Toronto's longtime base in Dunedin, I believe. And so that facility, we have good coverage of that in The Athletic with our colleagues Ken Rosenthal, as well as Mitch Bannon. They've made some substantial upgrades there over the years, and I think that was the big moment when Shohei Ohtani was also spotted there. Clearly they need better security or something, or I don't know.
I was gonna say, why do people keep getting spotted?
Or I mean, maybe the various agencies want that out there. But no, look, when we had to do this sort of Kyle Tucker tiers of where he might land, the Cubs were in this kind of category onto themselves of like, maybe if everything goes wrong for Kyle Tucker in free agency and he needs kind of a soft landing spot, whereas the Blue Jays had this unbelievable momentum coming off their pennant winning run to the World Series, game 7 of the World Series. And there's a lot of components that go into that. It's obviously the revenues generated as Canada's team, to have an entire country to yourself, essentially, as a market. They're just the viability as a contending club for the next several years. The momentum from signing Vlad Jr. to that monster extension. And then also seeing that atmosphere on TV and kind of the stage the Blue Jays were on. Players certainly notice things like that. And after years of kind of being the bridesmaid or perhaps being used for leverage in talks with players' actual preferred destinations, this is a great time for them to strike. And I do think Kyle Tucker is probably better suited to being kind of more of a complementary player next to Vlad Jr. than being that face of the franchise type.
This is something that's fascinating to me when I saw this. I don't think I had seen the Blue Jays connected to Kyle Tucker before, but I never really thought of them as like one of the top candidates for Kyle Tucker. But also, once Vlad Jr. signed that extension, we were talking Kyle Tucker, comps with Vlad Jr. So to think that the Blue Jays have a shot to have both of them on their roster, I just thought that was interesting. It was not something that had entered my mind as a possibility. Certainly not when last season started, and Vlad signed that extension, I think in the spring, right? Or was it right before the spring?
It was right after opening day, because I remember we talked to Tucker in the Wrigley Field clubhouse I think he had won some sort of like, I don't know, Player of the Week award or something like that, and it was right right around that time, maybe the day after Vlad's deal, and that was the obvious question because it seemed like
Yeah.
he was now the clear consensus, far and away number one position player in this class.
Yeah, and I think that what you were kind of touching on before, the idea that the Cubs were only in on this if somehow his market cratered. That's like an impossibility with this class, with this free agent class. There's just no one there. Like even if you want to say like that second half brought about questions and is he going to age for go with every negative thought you want to have, like someone's going to pay him. Like it's just inevitable when you are when this is what the class is, when this is what the free agent class is, and he's as talented and has the type of ceiling that he has. It's just hard. There's just no way you can get away from the idea that this is going to be a highly paid player. Now it's just like who are the true suitors and who's coming after him and who's going to pay him. Toronto is kind of like in this perfect situation where, like you said, I think they're better set up financially than maybe San Diego, but it kind of does feel like they're having their San Diego moment where it's like, okay, it's time to go get us a World Series. We were really close. And I think the Padres have been really close over the years. You don't want to miss that window. And they're kind of looking at it in that sense. I don't know what that payroll is going to look like if they do sign Tucker, but I don't think fans really care about that. Go get him. I think that the Cubs fans to kind of flip this to the Cubs, I think they would like to see that type of aggression from their team. But I think we're seeing while we aren't seeing the big signings yet. I think you and I are hearing enough to make it feel like the Cubs will do something that should at least, upgrade the roster, if not the offense in whole. Like the roster should be getting better in the coming weeks as we we're a few days away from heading to Orlando in the winter meetings.
2 points here. I don't think the Cubs are necessarily done adding to the position player side. I know that has sort of been one conclusion that has been jumped to when they say we're focused on pitching. We could play a game tomorrow with our group. And yes, they're not desperate. I also don't think, days before the winter meetings that they're totally shutting off that possibility. I think they're actually exploring some of those concepts. And then look, like Kyle Tucker, I wrote it the other day, throughout his career has been highly valued by the baseball industry. So there's no like, oh, who cares? He's gone. Like, not a big deal. Like, no, like coming out of high school, this powerhouse high school program in Florida, he was the number 5 pick in the draft. And then he was like a top 10, top 20 consensus prospect on all those lists when you go onto his baseball reference page. And then he, was he's made the playoffs every year of his career. He's got all this hardware, great back of the baseball card. So yeah, like that's going to sting. Like the Cubs on opening day, unless they make another big move, will probably not have as good an offense on paper. But I do think certain things have changed since, the time they acquired him. Obviously, Pete Crow Armstrong, it was not, necessarily consistent or a smooth level of production, but he was a 30-30 guy, all-star, MVP candidate for months. Like, will he exactly duplicate that? We don't know. Could he find maybe a more consistent level? That certainly seems reasonable, especially given his intelligence, and passion for the game. Michael Busch becoming an everyday first baseman, a monster in October. That's a big deal. Seiya Suzuki took kind of a next step forward. He can play some more right field. And then Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros are going to be a part of this one way or the other. We don't know exactly how. I think things can change quickly in the offseason, and that's kind of what players are told generally, in those exit meetings or, kind of off-season communications of like, this is kind of our plan. It could change, but we envision these roles for you. And I think Casey and Ballesteros will get some runway. You saw how Matt Shaw improved from the first half to the second half. And even both those hitters have stacked up a lot of good experiences from when the Cubs acquired Tucker. That like if you could not have gone into last year being like, oh, Owen Casey and Moises Ballesteros, like those are like you couldn't have done that. I think now it is reasonable to expect them to contribute to winning team because they did last year. Obviously, Casey missed some of that runway because of a concussion.
Right.
Ballesteros looked good. I mean, we don't know what they're going to become, but the baseball industry has valued them fairly highly as a top level prospects. Like these are not like retreads. Like it's kind of a moment for them to sink or swim to some extent. And they have a manager, Craig Counsell, who's proven to be very patient in that regard.
Yeah, there's probably still a way to. I mean, there are ways to upgrade this offense with a more established presence and get those guys regular playing time. I think you want to see what they can do. I think you'd feel a lot better if Casey got a little bit more time and showed a little bit more. Ballesteros, obviously, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks, whatever it was, where he was really hitting. It was nice to see, though. Like those are things you want to see young players do when they get their opportunity. And obviously Shaw's second half showed that, this guy can handle the big leagues. There's growing pains with all these guys. There will be. But I think fans in general, and maybe this front office would feel more secure if they had another bat, if they could go out and get another bat. And I don't think we should rule it out. It's not something we're going to rule out. But that said, I think we've seen where the priority is, and it's pitching. Something that we found that that happened over the last week. Was it last week, early this week, whenever it was? Dylan Cease is off the market. That the Cubs were in on Dylan Cease, I think, is something that nobody wants to hear that, right? And the fans don't want to hear that the Cubs were interested. The Cubs were willing to spend up to a certain point, but they were. And that's just not something we've heard of late when it comes to the Cubs and free agency. I mean, the last time they spent huge in free agency, am I remembering this right? Like the last really big contract was Dansby Swanson. Is that right? And then the last pitcher was Darvish. The last 9-figure pitcher was Yu Darvish. I mean, that's pre-pandemic. That's a long time for this team to be aggressively pursuing pitching. Maybe they were out there hunting some pitching beforehand. They haven't landed a 9-figure pitcher in a while. They still haven't, but at least they were in on and Dylan Cease, and they're showing real interest in getting a impactful arm that can miss some bats for this rotation.
Totally understand the skepticism. Cubs fans don't want to hear, oh, wow, like they were interested. But it is useful to know that the Cubs are engaging at that level of the pitching market this early in the offseason as well. We've seen the Cubs sort of hang back a lot of the time, waiting deeper into January, sometimes after the start of spring training to kind of strike on some of these guys. So the fact that, that Cease deal kind of came together, I think right before Thanksgiving, the fact that the Cubs were in on that makes you think they're not going to withdraw from the market. Like obviously Dylan Cease is kind of a unique pitcher in a lot of ways, but there are still lots of quality starting pitchers out there. And there's no reason to think the Cubs are just going to like give up on that pursuit. Obviously Cease has that swing and miss. He has great durability, but he's not he was not the only option out there, and I'd imagine as we get down to Orlando, if not before then, to see some more movement in that direction. And the Cubs have money to spend. It's not probably as much as fans and media would expect or want. Those opening day payrolls next year. Don't expect the Cubs to you know, lap the Dodgers, Phillies, Mets, Blue Jays, and that's a separate conversation. That's a whole nother episode of where they should be, but where I think they will be closer to like that CBT. And again, the CBT should not be the end all be all. That should not be this like firm guardrail, but the Cubs have not been, up or past that, except for that kind of one-off year. I forget which one it was. It just barely tripped
24, right? It was 24. They barely went over. And then last season, they dipped back down.
Reset. Okay. So it's like if they're around that mark, that would be honestly progress. I mean, smaller and relative progress, but they have some maneuverability here, and they can go bigger on pitching.
Yeah. So right now, according to Roster Resource, they're at like 196. Well, between 196 and 197, let's say. And the first threshold is 244. So let's give them between 45 and 50 million. You're gonna want to leave some. Maybe I don't know. I assume normally they want to leave some space for deadline acquisitions, but this at least sounds like it's going to be better than last offseason where they were pretty much at their budget and then had to possibly make an exception to even think about adding someone like Bregman. Now it sounds like, okay, that the budget may be a little bit higher and closer to the CBT. And we'll see if that means you go past the CBT at the deadline, or that is like the full season budget. Who knows? But it should give some optimism that they can continue to be aggressive and try and add a swing and miss pitcher. Missing out on Cease is not the end of the world. There are a lot. There's going to be a lot of action over the next 10 days, probably 10 days to 2 weeks. I think we're going to hear a lot of things. We're going to see a lot of movement. And the Cubs almost certainly, I would say, will be involved. Whether they get one of those big names, we'll see. But there's obviously Tatsuya Imai is a name that the Cubs have been linked to. You would expect that they'll continue to be linked to him. We'll see where that ends up. Michael King, Zach Gallen, these are all names we've mentioned before, and that I think the Cubs are going to continue to be involved in. And I think that's that's incredibly important for them to add to this rotation. And we've even heard they continue to be involved in closers and high leverage relievers. Multiple names have gone off the board, and they've been involved in general for those guys. Outside of like the Edwin Diaz, Devin Williams, I don't think we've heard much on that front. But beyond that, like the next step, they're involved. And again, I think fans are going to be frustrated until they don't want to hear involved. They want to hear the signing. But the budget news and the fact that they're I guess, back in the mix for these types of players, that they just weren't like really, they're constantly searching for that deal and constantly searching for that lower level type free agent and hoping for what was Jed's line, outperform projections. That was their hope, right? And projections are important. They like that. That's a lot of these front offices rely on those things, but you don't want to like strictly be relying on outperformance to get to where you need to be. So I think that this is a better feeling for the offseason. to complete that, you need to sign and get the players, but it does feel a little bit more optimistic as we head into the winter meetings from where we were even a year ago. Even though they did pull off that massive trade for Kyle Tucker, it's a different feeling around this team and what they can or cannot pull off.
Without a doubt. And just look at the team on the field. I mean, those 2 playoff rounds, the postseason atmosphere at Wrigley Field, the big crowds, the revenues generated off of a compelling season, competitive season, start to finish. Like, that is all that matters. And you do see like a stable enough foundation to where they can go out and do some of that stuff. I mean, these last couple of years have been kind of like building almost from scratch. They had a lot of holes to fill. They had a lot of pieces to put together. And now you're really looking for impact, and those type of talents are out there and available.
Absolutely. Okay, we're gonna have plenty going on next week. We have one more episode this week, but we'll save all the info. We have plenty of info and things we're gonna gather and share with all of you. So hopefully there's plenty of Cubs rumors for us to track down over the next 10-ish days. But we will be in Orlando starting Sunday. We'll have one more episode this week. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. This is Northside Territory. Make sure to rate, review, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and subscribe to The Athletic, where Patrick and I are on top of all things Cubs. Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care.